My name is Julian. I am 32 years old, and for the vast majority of my existence on this earth, I have been the load-bearing wall of my family. I am the one who carried the weight. 2 months ago, after years of sacrificing and saving every penny from my salary, I finally bought my dream home. I poured my savings, my blood, and my absolute soul into fixing it up from the ground up. I invited my parents and my younger brother for a simple housewarming barbecue. I just wanted them to sit on my patio, look at what I had accomplished, and be proud of me for once in their lives. But no one showed up. Not a single text message. Not a single phone call. They completely ghosted me. Why? Because they all went across town to watch my 25-year-old, unemployed brother pick up his new leased Ferrari instead. While I was standing in my backyard looking at a table perfectly set for a family that didn't even care about my existence, my phone finally rang. It was my father. He didn't say hello. He didn't apologize for missing the dinner. He just barked into the receiver. "We need you to put Tristan's name on your deed." Now, it's a family asset strategy. They wanted me to hand over half of my hard-earned real estate so they could use it as collateral to fund my brother's fake, flashy, internet influencer lifestyle. They literally laughed at me on a public live stream when I tried to set basic human boundaries. But there is one thing they didn't know. My house wasn't just a physical structure, and I am not a stupid man. I had already locked down the title, and I had the best lawyer in town on speed dial. And right now, they are the ones facing complete financial ruin, begging me for a place to sleep, while the walls close in around them. Before I tell you exactly what happened and how I brought their house of cards crashing down to the absolute ground, hit that like button if you believe in justice. And don't forget to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Now, let's go back to where it all began. I am a structural engineer. That is what pays my bills and my mortgage. I spend my days looking at complicated blueprints, inspecting foundations, and telling very rich, very stubborn commercial developers why their beautiful, floating glass staircases will eventually collapse and hurt someone. My entire job revolves around finding the hidden flaws. I look for stress fractures in concrete. I calculate tension in steel cables. I predict exactly how much weight a wooden beam or a steel pillar can hold before it snaps under extreme pressure. In the world of architecture and construction, a load-bearing wall is the absolute unsung hero of a building. It doesn't get covered in expensive, imported Italian wallpaper or fancy mosaic tile. It isn't the feature that people take pictures of when they walk into a grand lobby. It just stands there, hidden in the dark, holding up the roof, keeping everything from caving in on the people inside. It does all the heavy lifting and gets absolutely none of the glory. That was exactly my role in my family. I was the utility player. I was necessary, I was boring, and I was always expected to just stand there and take whatever weight they decided to drop on my shoulders. If a bill needed paying, Julian handled it. If a car broke down on the side of the highway at 2 in the morning, Julian was the one they called to bring the jumper cables. Then there is my younger brother, Tristan. In my line of work, we call someone like Tristan a facade. The facade is the pretty, expensive front of the building that hides the cheap insulation and the rusting, leaky plumbing behind it. Tristan is 25 years old. He is incredibly loud. He is exceptionally flashy, and he proudly describes himself on his social media profiles as a lifestyle entrepreneur. If you have ever spent more than 5 minutes on the internet, you know exactly what that actually means. It means he has absolutely no measurable skills. He takes heavily filtered photos of his overpriced lattes. He rents expensive designer clothes with the tags tucked in to take pictures in front of private jets he isn't even boarding, and he waits for a gullible audience of strangers to applaud him. He sells the illusion of wealth while secretly drowning in debt. And my parents, Harrison and Beatrice? They were his biggest enablers. They were the captive audience he always played to. They clapped for his every single move, no matter how financially disastrous or morally bankrupt it was. They treated his delusions of grandeur like gospel. Standing in my backyard that Saturday evening, the smell of premium charcoal burning down to gray ash, I felt a familiar, sickening coldness creeping into my chest. It was the ice-cold realization that nothing had changed and nothing ever would. The sun was dipping below the wooden fence I had stained with my own 2 hands, muscle aching after a long week of work. The condensation from the craft beer bottles had pooled on the patio table, leaving wet rings on the wood. I looked at the empty chairs. The silence in the air was so thick it was suffocating. My phone screen was completely dark. I had spent 8 grueling weeks restoring this 1920s craftsman home. I had sanded the original oak floors on my hands and knees until my back seized up and my knuckles bled. I had painted the walls, fixed the plumbing, rewired the outdated electrical sockets, and poured every single ounce of my soul into making it a home. I didn't just want a house. I wanted a sanctuary. I wanted to invite my father over, hand him a cold drink, and finally hear him say the words I had been starving for my entire life. "Good job, son. You built something solid. I'm proud of you." Instead, I got silence. The kind of silence that rings in your ears and makes your chest tight. The kind of silence that tells you exactly where you stand in the hierarchy of your own bloodline. You are nothing. You are an afterthought. You are only useful when they need something from you. I picked up the cold metal tongs and stared at the $30 ribeye steaks sitting in the cooler, the ice slowly melting around them. That was the exact moment I realized my foundation wasn't cracking. My foundation, as far as my parents were concerned, never existed in the first place. I had spent 32 years trying to build a solid house on a pit of quicksand. To truly understand the sheer, unadulterated audacity of what my father demanded on that phone call later that night, you have to understand the history. You have to understand how long I let them get away with this, and how deeply the roots of their manipulation went. I thought the worst was over just being ghosted. I was so incredibly wrong. The toxic dynamic in our house wasn't something that happened overnight. It was established early on, baked into the very culture of our family. I was the responsible one, the one who was expected to act like an adult before I even hit puberty. Tristan was the golden child, the miracle baby who could do absolutely no wrong. If Tristan broke a window playing baseball in the house, I was aggressively scolded by my father for not watching him closely enough. If I got a perfect score on an advanced calculus test, it was met with a distracted nod from my mother while she ironed Tristan's soccer uniform. If Tristan managed to simply not fail gym class, my mother would bake a massive chocolate cake and throw a celebration. But the real turning point, the exact moment the hierarchy was permanently burned into my brain and my heart, happened when I was 16 years old. I desperately wanted a truck. Not a brand new vehicle right off the dealership lot. Just an ugly, beat-up Ford Ranger that smelled like wet dog, had manual roll-up windows, and sported a rust spot the size of a dinner plate on the hood. The guy down the street, an old mechanic named Mr. Miller, was selling it for $3,000. For a 16-year-old kid in my neighborhood, $3,000 might as well have been $1 million. But I wanted it. I craved the freedom it represented. I wanted something that was solely mine. So I worked. I spent 2 entire, blistering hot summers mowing lawns across 3 different neighborhoods. I pushed a heavy, exhaust-spewing gas mower across overgrown yards until my hands were covered in thick, painful calluses that eventually turned into permanent scars. My shirts were permanently stained with green grass and sweat. My back ached every single night. Every single dollar I made, every crumpled $5 bill and handful of quarters, I folded neatly and stuffed into a large metal coffee can that I kept hidden in the very back of my bedroom closet, behind my winter coats. I didn't buy video games. I didn't go to the movies with my friends on Friday nights. I didn't buy new shoes. I worked, I saved, and I dreamed of that ugly Ford Ranger. 2 days before I was supposed to walk down the street and hand the money over to Mr. Miller for the keys, I came home from a long day at school. I walked into my room, opened my closet to deposit my lunch money savings, and my heart stopped. The coffee can was sitting right in the middle of my bed. The plastic lid was popped off, and it was completely empty. Not a single dollar bill was left. My stomach dropped straight to the floor, sickening nausea washing over me. I ran downstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack my sternum. I burst into the kitchen. My father, Harrison, was sitting calmly at the kitchen table. He was drinking a cup of black coffee and reading the sports section of the daily newspaper, looking completely unbothered. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking so badly I could barely form the words. "Where is my money?" He didn't even flinch. He didn't look up from the baseball scores. "Don't make a scene, Julian," he said. His voice was completely flat, devoid of any guilt, empathy, or remorse. Tristan got accepted into that junior business leadership camp in California. The tuition and the cross-country flights were extremely expensive. We needed the cash. I felt all the air leave my lungs in a violent rush. I grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from collapsing. "That was my money?" I choked out, tears of pure rage burning my eyes. "That was for my truck. I worked in the boiling sun for 2 years. Every single day." Harrison finally slowly lowered the newspaper. He looked at me with cold, hard, calculating eyes. "A truck is a want, Julian. Your brother's future is an investment. Don't be selfish. We are a family. We pool our resources for the greater good of the household." I stood there, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. My own father. He didn't ask to borrow it. He didn't offer a repayment plan. He just invaded my room and took it, because in his twisted mind, my labor, my sweat, and my property fundamentally belonged to the family, and the family fundamentally belonged to Tristan. I never got the truck. I had to call Mr. Miller and humiliatingly explain that I didn't have the cash. I drove my mother's rusted, embarrassing minivan until the day I left for college. And Tristan? He lasted exactly 1 week at that highly expensive, prestigious business camp before he called my mother crying, claiming the instructors were stifling his creative vision and didn't understand his genius. He flew home early. My $3,000 didn't buy a bright future. It bought 1 week of a spoiled teenager playing pretend across the country. That was the ultimate lesson. I am the resource pool. Tristan is the investment. Fast forward to my adult life. After the coffee can incident, I made sure I was entirely, fiercely financially independent. I paid my own way through college working night shifts at a warehouse. I never touched a dime of their money, mainly because there was no college fund left for me anyway. They had drained every single account, every line of credit, to support Tristan's endless string of failed ventures. 1 year he was a DJ buying $10,000 worth of audio equipment he never used. The next year he was launching a line of organic, vegan dog treats that sat rotting in our garage. He was a massive black hole for money, and my parents threw every spare dollar they had into his gravitational pull. When I finally saved enough money for a down payment on a house, I didn't tell a single soul in my family until the ink on the contract was dry. I didn't want them asking for a cut. I found a beautiful but neglected 1920s craftsman home on the edge of town. When I walked through it with the property inspector, he gave me a list of necessary repairs that was 3 pages long. The roof had a massive leak over the guest bedroom. The front wooden porch sagged dangerously to the left, and the original, stunning hardwood floors were buried under 3 layers of disgusting, mustard yellow shag carpet that smelled like 1978. But I am an engineer. I saw the bones. The framing was solid oak, cut 100 years ago. The foundation was poured concrete with absolutely no stress cracks. It was strong. It was resilient. It just needed someone to actually care about the structure, not just the cosmetic surface. I closed on the real estate deal without asking my father for a loan. I didn't ask my mother to co-sign the mortgage. I ate cheap instant ramen, skipped vacations, and worked brutal overtime hours for 5 straight years to secure that down payment. When the title company agent finally handed me the shiny new keys, I drove straight to the house, sat right in the middle of the empty, dusty living room floor, and just breathed. It was the first time in my entire life I legally owned something that Harrison couldn't raid for Tristan's next big thing. It was a boundary. It was physical, it was legal, and most importantly, it was lockable. Of course, the very moment I made the mistake of telling them I bought a house, the relentless criticism started. My Aunt Sylvia, my mother's older sister and the family's chief gossip and manipulator, called me the very next morning. "Your mother tells me you bought a complete garbage dump in the bad part of town," Sylvia chirped over the phone, her voice dripping with fake, condescending concern. Why on earth didn't you wait, Julian? Tristan is about to launch his new lifestyle app. Once that takes off and he gets venture capital funding, he could have easily helped you buy a nice, modern condo in a gated community. I gripped the phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. My house is fine, Sylvia. It has good bones. It just needs work. Well, don't expect us to come visit if we have to park our cars on the dirt and worry about getting mugged. She snorted viciously before hanging up on me. I ignored her poison. I spent every single weekend, every holiday, and every evening after work for 8 straight weeks restoring the place. I was out front one hot afternoon, covered head to toe in slate gray paint, when an older man walked over from the house next door. He introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, a retired union plumber. You're doing real good work, son, Mr. Henderson said, leaning his weathered arms on my chain-link fence. Taking a whole lot of elbow grease, but I know these builds. This house will outlast us all if you treat her right. Thanks, I smiled genuinely, wiping stinging sweat from my forehead with the back of my paint-stained wrist. I'm trying to build something permanent here. Roots take a lot of time, he nodded slowly, looking at the newly painted trim. But once they hold in the ground, they hold forever. I wanted my family to see those roots. I desperately wanted them to see that the son they ignored, the son they stole from, had built a castle with his own 2 hands. So, I sent a text message to the family group chat. Keys are in hand. The place is finally ready. Housewarming barbecue this Saturday at 5 p.m. Grandma Clara is coming. I'm making steaks. I sat on my new couch and watched the screen. Tristan replied first, within seconds, with a single sparkle emoji. No, congratulations, bro. No, I can't wait to see it. Just a mindless sparkle. My mother replied an hour later. We'll try, honey. It's been such a crazy, busy week with Tristan's brand launch prep. Lots of moving parts. My father? He left the message on read. I convinced myself it was fine. I lied to myself. I told myself Harrison isn't a texter. He's an old school, show up and criticize the way you mow the lawn kind of guy. I told myself that was his twisted, emotionally stunted version of love. I went to the actual boutique butcher shop downtown and bought 4 of the best, thickest cuts of meat they had. I bought the expensive, pine needle-tasting craft IPA my father liked. I set the table on the back patio, for chairs perfectly aligned, plus 1 comfortable armchair for my grandmother, Clara. I thought this was going to be the turning point. I thought they would finally see me. I was so incredibly, devastatingly wrong. At exactly 4:45 p.m. on Saturday, I lit the grill. The smell of the charcoal instantly brought back memories of childhood summers, back before I realized how dysfunctional we truly were. I stood on my back porch, holding a cold beer I bought with my own hard-earned money, looking out at a yard I legally owned. I let myself feel a sliver of genuine pride. I had survived them. I had built something. At exactly 5 p.m., a yellow taxi pulled into the driveway. My heart jumped into my throat, but it was just Grandma Clara. She walked up the concrete path slowly, leaning heavily on her wooden cane, holding a massive Tupperware container of her famous German potato salad. Clara is my father's mother, but she is absolutely nothing like him. Her eyes are sharp, her mind is like a steel trap, and she sees right through the ridiculous family nonsense. She stopped at the edge of the patio, looked at my empty driveway, looked at the meticulously set table, and then looked at me. "Where is the circus?" she asked, her tone dry and completely devoid of surprise. "Probably stuck in traffic," I lied smoothly, walking down the steps to take the heavy bowl from her frail hands. "You know exactly how Dad drives. He probably took a shortcut that adds 20 minutes just to prove a point to the GPS." We sat on the patio. The charcoal was turning gray and radiating intense heat. The afternoon air was perfect. 5:15 p.m. I checked my phone. Nothing. Not a text, not a missed call. 5:30 p.m. The coals were starting to burn down. I pulled my phone out again and sent a quick text to the group chat. "Grill is hot. ETA? Silence. By 5:45 p.m., the sun was beginning to set, casting long, stretching, melancholic shadows across the yard I had spent weeks manicuring. The silence in the backyard wasn't peaceful anymore. It was incredibly heavy. It was the deafening sound of being actively, maliciously forgotten. "Julian," Grandma Clara said softly, her voice breaking the heavy quiet, "put the steaks on the grill. Just for us." "I'll wait a bit longer," I said. My voice sounded tight, defensive, and pathetic in my own ears. They probably just got held up with Tristan's stuff. You know how Tristan is. He's always late. Clara reached across the wooden table and placed her paper-thin, wrinkled hand directly over mine. Her grip was surprisingly strong, anchoring me to reality. "Honey," she said, looking me dead in the eye with a gaze that held decades of painful wisdom. "Stop waiting for people who are busy chasing shiny things. They aren't stuck in traffic. If they were planning on coming, your father would already be standing right here on this patio, holding a beer, telling you that you're holding the spatula at the wrong angle." I let out a dry, brittle laugh that scraped the back of my throat. She was right. She was always right. At 6 p.m., I walked into the kitchen and shoved the expensive $30 steaks into the refrigerator. I didn't have the heart to grill them. The joy was completely sucked out of the meat. I heated up a can of chicken noodle soup for Clara and made myself a sad, cold turkey sandwich. We sat at the kitchen counter, eating in depressing silence, while the beautiful dining table outside sat perfectly set for ghosts. We were just finishing our dinner when my phone buzzed violently on the counter. It wasn't a text message offering an excuse. It was a social media notification. Tristan_lifestyle is live. Biggest surprise ever. My stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot. Against my better judgment, I tapped the screen. The video instantly filled my phone with blaring audio. Bright, fluorescent lights reflecting off perfectly polished white tile floors. It was the unmistakable, sterile interior of a high-end exotic car dealership. Tristan was front and center, wearing oversized designer sunglasses indoors, holding his phone on an expensive gimbal selfie stick. Behind him, gleaming under the showroom lights, sat a fire-engine red Ferrari with a giant, ridiculous, oversized red velvet bow stuck to the hood. "Guys!" Tristan shrieked into the camera, his voice echoing obnoxiously in the massive showroom. "I am literally shaking right now. Look at this absolute beast. The brand is leveling up today. Big things are coming." He panned the camera around the room. There was my mother, Beatrice. She was wearing her best dress, wiping actual, theatrical tears from her eyes. "He worked so incredibly hard for this," she sobbed directly to the camera, clapping her hands together as if Tristan had just single-handedly cured a global disease instead of posting 3 highly edited photos a week on Instagram. And then the camera panned to Harrison, my father. He was vigorously shaking a salesman's hand. His chest puffed out so far he looked like a pigeon, looking like a man who had just conquered the entire financial world. He looked intensely proud. He looked engaged. He looked exactly like a father who actually showed up for his son. Just not for me. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to absolute ice water in my veins. A Ferrari. That is a multi-$100,000 machine. Even used, it's a fortune. I know for an absolute fact my father's salary as a mid-level regional manager isn't covering that. I know my mother pays for her weekly groceries by shifting balances between high-interest credit cards. In the background of the live video, the salesman, a guy with a slicked-back haircut wearing a silver name tag that clearly said Felix, was organizing some documents on a frosted glass desk. "Just need a few more signatures on the lease agreement right here, Mr. Harrison, and the monthly premium paperwork is all set to go." Felix's voice drifted clearly through the audio, totally ruining Tristan's illusion of wealth. "It's a lease," I said out loud in my kitchen, my voice hollow. "They're leasing it." "Of course they are," Grandma Clara muttered in disgust, looking over my shoulder at the screen, her mouth set in a hard line. "Buying expensive champagne on a cheap beer budget. They always have. Absolute fools. They are going to lose everything." I didn't feel angry right then. I just felt completely, utterly numb. They weren't stuck in traffic on the interstate. They weren't in a hospital emergency room. They were 45 minutes away, standing in a luxury dealership, signing a predatory lease on an exotic sports car for my unemployed, narcissistic brother, while I sat here in my new house with cold charcoal and empty chairs. Suddenly, my phone vibrated in my hand, dropping the live stream video. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen pop up on my phone all day. Dad. I stared at it. A pathetic, childish, broken part of my brain thought maybe, just maybe, he was calling to apologize. Maybe he just looked at his watch, realized what time it was, and felt a shred of guilt. I hit the green accept button and put the phone to my ear. Hello, Julian. Harrison's voice boomed obnoxiously through the speaker. I could hear the dealership noise in the background. Salesmen talking, people clapping, the low, aggressive rumble of a high-performance engine starting up. We're wrapping up here. Listen, we need to come by your place tomorrow morning. Early. I gripped the edge of the granite kitchen counter until my knuckles ached. You completely missed the housewarming, I said. My voice was completely flat, drained of any emotion. What? Oh yeah, right. Sorry. Time completely got away from us. This negotiation with the dealer took forever. They were trying to fleece us. He didn't sound sorry at all. He sounded highly annoyed that I even brought my stupid little dinner up. Anyway, forget the barbecue. We need to talk business tomorrow. Have your property documents ready. The deed, the mortgage info, the appraisal, everything you have. I blinked, completely confused, my mind struggling to connect the dots. My property documents? Why? We need to restructure some things for Tristan's insurance and credit profile, Harrison said, his voice taking on that familiar, authoritative, I am the patriarch and you will obey tone. This exotic lease requires a much stronger asset base for the cosigner to get the insurance premiums down. We'll explain the details when we get there. Be ready at 8 a.m. sharp. And have a pot of coffee made. Dad, what are you talking about? Stop whining, Julian. Stop being difficult. This is a family asset strategy. 8 a.m. Click. He hung up on me. I stood in my kitchen, the absolute silence of my house pressing down heavily on my shoulders. A family asset strategy. Grandma Clara was watching me closely, her eyes narrowed. What did that idiot want? He wants my deed, I whispered, the sickening realization hitting me like a physical punch to the gut. He wants to use my house to back Tristan's car lease. I thought that was the absolute worst of it. I thought they just wanted to use my name on a piece of paper. But when the sun came up the next morning, I learned exactly how far a toxic family will go to destroy the load-bearing wall. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. I sat in a hard wooden chair in my dark living room, staring at the shadows on the wall, listening to the house settle. I heard the wind rattle a loose pane of glass in the attic window that I hadn't gotten around to fixing yet. I heard the low, steady hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. For the first time since the real estate agent handed me the keys, I didn't feel like the proud owner of this house. I felt like a squatter, just sitting in the dark, waiting for the real landlord to kick the door down and throw me out onto the street. I sat there in the dark and ran the financial numbers in my head. A leased Ferrari. The insurance premium alone for a 25-year-old male with absolutely no provable income, no W-2, and a terrible driving record would be astronomical. It would be thousands of dollars a month. The dealership and the insurance company would undoubtedly demand a bulletproof cosigner. Harrison's credit was likely completely maxed out. I knew for a fact they had remortgaged their own house twice already. They needed collateral. They needed equity. They needed the one and only thing in this entire family that actually held tangible legal value, my house. Sunday morning arrived with a violent, obnoxious horn honking outside my front window. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7:50 a.m. They were early. I stood up, my joints stiff from sitting all night, walked to the front window and pulled back the blinds. The bright red Ferrari was parked aggressively, diagonally across my driveway, completely blocking in my modest commuter sedan. Tristan hopped out of the driver's seat. He was wearing matching designer sweatpants, holding his phone up high, already recording the exterior of my house for his followers, probably talking about how he was visiting his poor brother. Harrison's large SUV pulled in a moment later and parked illegally on the grass near the curb, crushing the new sod I had just laid down. He marched up the concrete walkway carrying a thick, expensive-looking leather folder tucked under his arm. Beatrice trailed closely behind him, holding a white paper bag from an expensive downtown bakery, smiling brightly like she was arriving for a lovely, peaceful Sunday family brunch. I walked to the front door, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt, and unlocked it before they could even ring the bell. "Surprise!" Beatrice chirped loudly, stepping forward to hug me. I took a deliberate, massive step back. Her arms closed around empty air. She frowned, looking genuinely confused as to why I wouldn't want to embrace her. "Coffee ready?" Harrison barked, brushing right past me into the narrow entryway. He didn't wipe his shoes on the mat. He tracked fresh dirt, mud, and crushed grass directly onto the hardwood floor I had spent 3 days polishing by hand. "Take your shoes off," I said, my voice dangerously low. He completely ignored me, not even breaking his stride. "Kitchen table. Let's go." "We don't have all day, Julian." They swarmed into my house like a virus. It felt like a hostile home invasion. Tristan didn't even acknowledge my presence. He walked straight past the kitchen, aggressively wrinkling his nose in disgust. "Ugh, it smells like old wood and dust in here," he complained loudly, waving a hand in front of his face. "It smells like oak," I said, staring at the back of his head. "Because it's real wood, not the cheap laminate you're used to." "Whatever." Tristan dismissed me with a flick of his wrist, wandering down the hallway toward the bedrooms. "Where is the second bedroom? I need to check the natural lighting in there." "Why are you looking at the bedrooms?" I asked, a deep sense of dread pooling in my stomach as I followed Harrison and Beatrice into the kitchen. Beatrice started unpacking expensive pastries onto my clean granite counters, carelessly pushing my coffee maker out of the way. "Oh, honey, this layout is just a bit cramped, isn't it? We might need to hire a guy to knock down this wall right here to open up the chi. It really blocks the flow of energy." "Don't touch that wall," I said, feeling my heart rate spike, my engineering brain taking over. "That is a load-bearing wall, Mom. You knock that down, the roof literally collapses on your head and kills everyone inside." "So dramatic," she sighed heavily, rolling her eyes as if I were just being a difficult teenager. Harrison pulled out a chair and sat down at the head of my table. "My table." He slammed the heavy leather folder down on the wood with a loud smack. "Sit down, Julian. Let's get this sorted out right now so we can go celebrate Tristan's big milestone at the country club." I didn't sit. I stood on the opposite side of the table, crossing my arms tightly over my chest, planting my feet firmly on the floor. "Celebrate what exactly? A car none of you can actually afford." Harrison's face instantly flushed a dark, angry red. "Watch your tone with me, boy. That vehicle is a necessary marketing tool for your brother's career. You have to spend money to make money." "His career?" I repeated, the word tasting like toxic ash in my mouth. "Right? The career that changes every 6 months. What is he this week? A life coach? A crypto guru? I am a brand," Tristan shouted indignantly from the hallway. He suddenly appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding his phone up, clearly deeply annoyed that I wasn't worshipping his success. "And brands need to project massive success, Julian. You wouldn't understand how the internet works. You play in the dirt with cement for a living. I engineer structures that keep people from dying." I corrected him coldly, staring him down. "Same thing," Tristan sniffed, turning his attention back to his phone screen, already bored with the conversation. Harrison unzipped the leather folder. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. I expected a loan application. I expected him to ask me for a massive cash handout to cover the down payment. But when I saw the bold, black letters printed across the very top of the first page, All the breath was instantly knocked out of my lungs. It read, "Quitclaim deed." "Here is the situation," Harrison said, tapping the legal paper with a thick, heavy finger. "The lease on the Ferrari is high, sure, but the insurance premium is completely astronomical because of Tristan's minor driving history." "I hit one stupid mailbox," Tristan yelled from the hall. "3 mailboxes and a city fire hydrant," Harrison corrected him, but his tone was incredibly gentle, like he was reprimanding a toddler who spilled milk. He turned his attention back to me, and his eyes immediately hardened into steel. "To get the financing fully approved and the insurance down to a livable monthly number, we need to show the bank a significantly stronger asset base. My credit is currently tapped out with the mortgage on our house. We need a physical asset to back the policy." He pushed the quitclaim deed across the smooth wood of the table toward me. "We need you to add Tristan to the title of this house," Harrison said. He said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like he was asking me to pass the salt at dinner. "As a tenant in common." It's a clean 50-50 split on paper. It boosts his net worth instantly. The bank sees he legally owns real estate. His rate drops by half and everyone wins. I stared at the paper. The legal jargon began to blur in front of my eyes. "You want me to give him half of my house? A house I bought." "It's just on paper, sweetie," Beatrice chimed in quickly, smiling nervously and aggressively, pushing a blueberry muffin across the counter toward me. "It doesn't mean he actually owns it, Julian. It's just a silly legal formality to help the family out in a pinch. You know we would do it for you in a heartbeat if you needed it." "No, you absolutely wouldn't," I said, my voice trembling with a deep, dark rage I didn't even know I possessed. "You stole my truck money when I was 16 to fund his fake business camp. You didn't help me pay for college. You haven't given me a dime. That was over a decade ago." Harrison snapped fiercely, slamming his open hand on the table. "Let it go. Grow up. Look, Julian, you are a single guy. You have this whole big house, all this equity sitting here doing absolutely nothing. It is incredibly selfish to hoard it when your brother is on the verge of launching his life and becoming a millionaire." "Hoard it?" I let out a loud laugh. It was a dark, dangerous, unhinged sound that echoed loudly in the kitchen. "I built this. I paid for this. Every single cent came from my salary. I worked for this." "And who raised you?" Harrison countered, leaning forward aggressively, trying to physically intimidate me. "Who put clothes on your back when you were a kid? Who fed you? This is what real families do. We leverage each other's strengths for the greater good." "My strength is my credit score and my salary," I said softly, staring right through him. "His strength is spending money that doesn't exist." "Dad, hurry up," Tristan whined loudly, walking into the kitchen and leaning heavily against the counter next to my mother. "The lighting in the guest room is actually perfect for my unboxing videos. I need to start setting up my studio gear in there today. Can we hire some movers to get Julian's ugly desk out to the garage? It ruins the aesthetic." I froze. My blood ran completely cold. I slowly turned my head to look at Tristan, and then back to Harrison's face. "Studio?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Harrison shifted very uncomfortably in his chair. He suddenly found the grain of the wood on the table very interesting. He refused to meet my eyes. "Well, Julian, since he is going to be legally on the deed, it makes financial sense for him to utilize the space. He can't pay rent on his luxury downtown apartment and pay the Ferrari car note at the same time. He is going to move into the second bedroom for a few months, just until the brand really takes off." The Trojan horse. They weren't just after my equity to secure a car lease. They were moving him in. They wanted me to legally sign over half of my life's work, pay the full mortgage every month, and live with the parasite who had drained my parents dry. They wanted him to park his leased Ferrari in my driveway while he filmed TikTok videos in the room I planned to use as my engineering home office. "So," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper, "you blew off my housewarming dinner to go get a car. And now you are standing in my kitchen, tracking mud on my floor, demanding I give you the house and let him live here. We are here to help you manage your assets, Harrison shouted, his face turning purple with rage, a vein popping in his forehead. Sign the damn paper, Julian. Be a man. Take care of your brother. I stood there, looking at the quitclaim deed. The fancy silver pen was resting right beside it. I felt a massive structural shift inside myself. The tension had finally peaked. The load-bearing wall was about to collapse, but it wasn't going to crush me. It was going to crush them. I stood there in my own kitchen, staring down at the thick, crisp legal paper resting on the pristine, hand-polished surface of my dining table. The bold black letters spelling out "Quitclaim Deed" seemed to vibrate against the white page. Right beside it, Harrison had placed a heavy, expensive silver pen, perfectly angled, pointing directly at the signature line. It was a terrifyingly calculated setup. They had walked into my home, tracked mud across my floors, insulted the very air I breathed, and now they expected me to simply pick up that pen and sign away half of my life, my absolute financial security, and my sanity. I felt a massive, profound structural shift taking place deep inside my chest. It was the exact sensation you get when a massive steel cable finally reaches its maximum tensile strength. The tension had peaked. The load-bearing wall of my childhood, the mental barrier that had always forced me to submit, was about to collapse completely. But it wasn't going to crush me underneath the rubble. It was going to crush them. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a childish tantrum the way Tristan would have. When a commercial building is officially condemned by an engineer, you don't stand there and argue with the cracking bricks. You don't try to reason with a sinking foundation. You evacuate the premises immediately and you bring in the wrecking ball. I went into absolute, cold, calculating work mode. The emotional, desperate son who just wanted a pat on the back was dead. The structural engineer who dealt in hard facts and uncompromising reality took over. I reached slowly across the table. As my hand moved toward the document, I saw Harrison's rigid shoulders visibly relax. He let out a long, heavy exhale of relief. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a sickening, triumphant smirk flash across Tristan's perfectly moisturized face. My mother, Beatrice, clapped her hands together lightly, a bright, toxic smile spreading across her lips. They genuinely thought they had won. They thought 32 years of relentless psychological conditioning had done its job flawlessly, and I was going to fall right back into my designated place at the very bottom of the family hierarchy. I picked up the quitclaim deed. I held the thick, expensive parchment paper in both of my hands. I felt the weight of it. I looked Harrison dead in the eye, holding his gaze with a cold intensity that made his triumphant smile falter for just a fraction of a second. And then, with one smooth, deliberate motion, I tore the legal document straight down the middle. The sound of the thick paper ripping was incredibly loud, echoing sharply in the dead quiet of the kitchen. "Julian!" Beatrice screamed in absolute shock, her hands flying to her face. She knocked against the counter, dropping her ceramic coffee cup. It hit the floor and shattered into a dozen pieces, splashing dark, hot liquid across the oak wood I had spent weeks restoring. I didn't stop. I placed the two halves of the deed together, lined up the edges perfectly, and tore them again. And then again. My hands were perfectly steady. My heart rate didn't even spike. I tore that highly expensive, professionally drafted legal document into tiny, illegible pieces of worthless confetti. I held my hands out over the counter and let the pieces fall directly into the open white box of expensive bakery pastries Beatrice had brought as a Trojan horse. "Get out," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. It was absolute. It was the heavy, immovable voice of a man who owned the ground he was currently standing on. "Excuse me?" Tristan laughed nervously, taking a quick step back toward the hallway. He looked at me like I had suddenly grown a second head. The smirk was completely wiped off his face. "Are you entirely psycho? Do you have any idea how much a real estate lawyer charged Dad to draft that contract? You just destroyed legal property." "I said get out of my house," I repeated, stepping around the large wooden table, slowly closing the distance between us. Take your leased Ferrari. Take your completely fake lifestyle brand. Take your unbelievable, astronomical audacity. And get off my real estate right this second. Harrison jumped out of his chair so fast it tipped over backwards and crashed loudly against the freshly painted drywall. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated, violent fury. "You listen to me, boy," he spat, pointing a thick, trembling finger mere inches from my face. "I am your father. You do not ever talk to me like that. You owe us. You owe this family your life. We raised you. I don't owe you a single damn thing," I said, stepping even closer, forcing him to back up against the counter. I am 6'2". Harrison is barely 5'9" on a good day. For the first time in my entire life, I fully utilized my physical height to tower over him, casting a shadow over his red, furious face. I forced him to tilt his head back to look up at me. "I paid for this house. My name is on the deed. Mine alone. I earned the salary. I saved the money. I fixed the foundation. And it stays exactly that way until the day I am put in the ground. You are making a massive, catastrophic mistake," Harrison snarled, his spit hitting my shirt. But beneath the bluster and the rage, I saw the very first flicker of genuine, primal panic swimming in his eyes. He tried to push past me, trying to physically reclaim his dominance in the room, but I stood my ground like a reinforced concrete pillar. I didn't budge an inch. "You cut us out today, Julian, and you are entirely on your own. No family, no safety net, no inheritance. You will be dead to us." "I've been completely on my own since I was 16 years old, Harrison," I said coldly, looking down at him with nothing but pure pity. "I'm just making the paperwork official today. Keep your imaginary inheritance." I turned my back on him, walked down the short hallway to the front entryway, grabbed the heavy brass handle, and threw the front door wide open. The crisp morning air rushed into the house, clearing out the suffocating stench of their entitlement. "Leave, right now," I commanded, pointing toward the driveway where that ridiculous red car was parked. "Or I call the police and report 3 hostile trespassers refusing to leave my property. And I promise you, I will have a heavy-duty tow truck drag that leased Ferrari off my grass before the rubber even hits the asphalt." Tristan looked genuinely terrified. He saw the cold, dead look in my eyes and realized his older brother wasn't playing a game. He didn't say another word. He grabbed his phone, scurried out the door, and practically sprinted down the walkway, clutching his device to his chest like a child holding a security blanket. Beatrice followed him closely, crying loudly, her face buried in her hands. "How can you be so incredibly cruel to your own flesh and blood?" she wailed dramatically to the empty neighborhood, hoping a neighbor would hear her victim routine. "We are your family. We love you." Harrison stopped right in the doorway. The anger in his face suddenly melted, morphing rapidly into something entirely different, something I had never seen on his face before. It was pure, desperate, undeniable panic. He looked back at the kitchen, at the torn pieces of paper resting on the muffins, and then back at me. And in that singular moment of absolute, crushing desperation, his massive ego completely shattered into a million pieces, and the real truth finally spilled out of his mouth like highly toxic sludge. "You don't understand what you're doing," Harrison screamed, his voice cracking, shedding all pretense of authority. "We need this house, Julian. The bank is taking ours." I froze. My hand hovered over the wooden doorframe. The air in my lungs stopped moving. "What did you just say?" "The house is gone," Harrison yelled, actual tears of frustration forming in the deep wrinkles around his eyes. "I remortgaged it 3 separate times. I took out everything. The home equity lines of credit, my entire 401k, your mother's retirement funds. I maxed out 6 credit cards. All of it is gone." My engineering mind raced at lightning speed, trying to process the sheer, catastrophic magnitude of the financial disaster he was confessing to. He was talking about millions of dollars in generational wealth, completely vaporized. For what? Where did all that money go? Harrison looked out at the driveway, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger at Tristan, who was currently hiding behind the passenger side door of the Ferrari, refusing to look at us. His crypto investments, the dog treat company, the stupid lifestyle app. He told me it was a guaranteed return on investment. He swore to me we would double our money in 6 months. But the market crashed, his partners vanished, and he lost all of it. Every single dime. We are facing a hard foreclosure at the end of this month. We have absolutely nowhere to go, Julian. That's why we needed his name on your deed. We needed a place to live. We needed your equity to save us. The final, brutal twist of the knife. The ultimate, sickening revelation. They didn't just want my equity to secure a lower insurance premium on a luxury car lease. The Ferrari was a desperate, idiotic, smoke and mirrors distraction. It was a lease Tristan signed under Beatrice's name, using her last shred of clean credit, solely to keep up appearances on social media while their actual lives burned to the absolute ground behind the scenes. They wanted half of my house because they were utterly, completely bankrupt. They planned to force their way into my home, claim legal residency, refuse to leave, and make me financially responsible for their survival for the rest of my life. I looked at my father, the man who had stolen my truck money without a second thought, the man who had called me selfish for buying my own home. He wasn't a powerful patriarch anymore. He was just a desperate, broken, pathetic gambler who had bet his entire life on a losing horse and was now begging the son he abused to pay off his bookie. I expected to feel rage. I expected to feel an overwhelming sense of vindication. But instead, I felt a profound sense of disgust, and underneath it, an incredibly liberating wave of pure, unadulterated clarity. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel the urge to save him. I felt completely free. "You made your investment, Harrison?" I said, my voice completely devoid of pity, echoing his exact words from 16 years ago. "Now you get to live in it. Julian, please, you can't do this. Goodbye." I slammed the heavy solid oak door directly in his face. I threw the brass deadbolt with a loud, satisfying click. Then I slid the heavy metal chain latch firmly into place. I stood there in the quiet entryway, my back against the wood, listening to them screaming at each other in the driveway. I heard Beatrice wailing. I heard Harrison shouting profanities at Tristan. I heard the Ferrari engine rev aggressively, a pathetic roar of fake power. I heard Harrison's heavy truck tires spin violently on the gravel, tearing up the grass as they sped away in defeat. And then, slowly, the chaotic noise faded away down the street, leaving nothing but peace. I walked calmly back into the kitchen. I grabbed a black trash bag from under the sink, swept the torn pieces of the quitclaim deed, the ruined pastries, and the shattered coffee cup into the garbage, tied it shut tightly, and tossed it into the outside bin. Then, for the first time since I bought the property, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, poured myself a hot cup, and sat at my kitchen table. The house was entirely silent. My foundation was finally secure. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I honestly thought kicking them out and exposing their massive bankruptcy would be the absolute end of the nightmare. I thought the sheer, crushing humiliation of the truth being out in the open would force them to retreat into the shadows and leave me alone. I severely underestimated the toxic resilience of desperate people who have nothing left to lose but their fabricated public image. By Monday morning, the organized smear campaign had begun in full, aggressive force. I woke up at 6 a.m. to get ready for a site inspection downtown, picked up my phone from the nightstand, and found 22 missed calls and countless text messages. They weren't from my parents. They were from extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Aunt Sylvia, my cousin Preston, Uncle Robert, people who didn't even know my home address or what I did for a living, were suddenly blowing up my voicemail. They were calling me a monster, a narcissist, an ungrateful brat, and a terrible son who was abusing his elderly parents. I made the colossal mistake of opening my social media apps while drinking my morning coffee. Tristan had worked overtime. He had posted a highly edited, dramatically lit storytime video on all his major platforms. He didn't use my full name, but he didn't have to. Anyone who knew us knew exactly who he was targeting. The title was plastered across the screen in massive, bold, red letters. Toxic family alert. My older brother tried to sabotage my success and steal my brand because he's jealous of my shine. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the absolute fiction unfold, morbidly fascinated by his ability to lie without blinking. In the video, Tristan claimed I had begged them to come over to my new house just so I could ambush them and scream at my parents. He claimed I had promised to help him with his business taxes and secure a commercial real estate space for his studio, and then violently pulled the rug out from under him just to humiliate him in front of his followers. He cried. He actually managed to squeeze out fake, dry tears, wiping his eyes incredibly carefully with a tissue so he wouldn't smudge his expensive skincare products or ruin his lighting aesthetic. He literally threw our parents out on the street. Tristan sobbed directly into the camera lens, his voice shaking with practiced emotion. I just wanted to bond with him. I wanted to share my massive success and lift him up. But some insecure men just can't handle being around a powerful entrepreneur. He threatened to destroy my car. He threatened my life. The comments underneath the video were brutal, relentless, and completely unhinged. Thousands of strangers were attacking me. Cut him off, King. He sounds like a total narcissist. Sue him for emotional damage and defamation. Don't let his negative energy dim your light. You are destined for greatness. My mother, Beatrice, was playing the ultimate tragic martyr on her own Facebook page. She posted a bleak, black and white picture of an empty, broken bird nest with a highly dramatic caption. A mother's heart physically breaks and shatters into a million pieces when her children turn their backs on the nest and abandon the family. We gave him everything, and this is how he repays us. Prayers needed for my family during this incredibly dark financial time. My first instinct, fueled by pure adrenaline and anger, was to fight back publicly. I wanted to post the absolute truth. I wanted to expose the impending foreclosure, the 3 remortgaged loans, the stolen truck money, the fake Ferrari lease, and the fact that Tristan was a broke fraud living off his mother's credit cards. But my engineering brain quickly kicked in and overrode my emotions. When you are dealing with a highly toxic chemical spill, you don't jump into the mud and wrestle the pigs. You build a containment wall. You secure the perimeter. You gather evidence. Instead of responding and giving them the engagement they desperately craved, I went into absolute lockdown mode. I blocked them, all of them, my mother, my father, Tristan, Aunt Sylvia, Uncle Robert, and every single flying monkey relative who left a nasty comment or sent a threatening text. I blocked their phone numbers. I blocked their social media accounts. I restricted my own profiles. I became a complete digital ghost. Then, right around noon, I received a seemingly innocent text message from my cousin Preston. Preston had always been the quiet, observant one in the family. We used to play video games together when we were kids. He texted me, "Hey Julian, I saw the crazy video Tristan posted. He is completely insane. I am so sorry they are doing this to you. Just wanted to check in and see if you're okay. I know how Dad and Aunt Beatrice can be when they get desperate." I felt a brief, comforting wave of relief. One sane person in the family. One person who actually saw through the lies. I quickly replied, "Thanks, Preston. This has been an absolute nightmare. I had to kick them out yesterday. They tried to commit real estate fraud and steal my house equity." 10 minutes later, Preston called me. I answered, grateful to hear a friendly voice. We talked for a few minutes. He sounded incredibly sympathetic. He asked me how I was holding up, if I was safe at the house, if I needed him to bring over some dinner. But then the conversation shifted. He started asking very specific, probing questions. "Are you staying there tonight?" Preston asked casually. "You should probably change your locks, man. Who knows what they might do? They are acting crazy. Did you get one of those smart locks for the front door?" "Yeah. I said, leaning back in my office chair, my senses suddenly heightening. I put a digital keypad lock on the front door the day I moved in. Good call, very smart, Preston said. His tone was just a little too eager. What's the code? Just in case there's an emergency and someone needs to get to you, or if you get locked out. You know I've got your back. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. It was a subtle shift, but it was absolutely there. The wording, the timing, the specific focus on my home security. I realized with sickening clarity that Preston wasn't calling to comfort me. He was a spy. He was fishing for information to feed back to the hive. I decided to run a structural stress test on his loyalty. Sure, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level and friendly. It's 1-9-8-4. 1-9-8-4. Got it. Stay safe, Julian. Let me know if you need anything, he said quickly, and hung up the phone. I immediately opened my smart home security app on my phone. The real code to my front door was a completely random string of 6 numbers that only I knew. I opened the live feed from my newly installed Ring doorbell camera and propped my phone up on my desk while I worked on my blueprints. Exactly 45 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected at front door. I maximized the video feed on my screen. A familiar silver SUV pulled aggressively into my driveway. My mother and Tristan got out. They didn't look like victims. They looked like burglars. Tristan wasn't holding a camera this time. He was holding a large, heavy cardboard box clearly labeled studio lighting equipment. Beatrice walked straight up the steps to the electronic keypad. She didn't even hesitate. She didn't look around. She confidently reached out and punched in 1-9-8-4. The lock buzzed loudly, flashing a bright, aggressive red light. Access denied. It didn't work, Beatrice hissed. Her voice picked up perfectly by the high-definition microphone. She looked panicked. Preston said he was absolutely sure it was 1984. Tristan complained loudly, dropping the heavy box on my wooden porch with a loud thud that made me wince. Try it again. Maybe you typed it wrong. Your fingers are clumsy. She tried it again. Beep, 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 beep. Red light. She tried my birth year. Red light. She tried my childhood phone number. Red light. Tristan got incredibly frustrated and violently kicked the bottom of my heavy oak door with his expensive designer sneaker, leaving a black scuff mark on the wood. This is completely ridiculous. I have a major brand deal video due on Friday. I absolutely need that spare room for my studio. This is my house too. We'll just call a locksmith right now, Beatrice said, pulling out her phone and frantically swiping the screen. We'll tell them we lost the key and we live here. We have the same last name, they won't ask questions. My blood boiled. They were actually going to break into my house and squat. They were going to force an illegal eviction scenario, knowing that once they had their belongings inside, it would take months of legal battles to legally remove them from the premises. I pressed the microphone button on my Ring app. My voice boomed out of the doorbell speaker, metallic, loud, and echoing across the porch. Step away from my door. Beatrice jumped 3 feet in the air, screaming and dropping her phone on the concrete porch. Tristan stumbled backward in shock, nearly tripping over his own heavy box of equipment. Julian. Beatrice looked frantically at the small camera lens, squinting against the sunlight. Julian, honey, please open up the door. We just need to get some of Tristan's things inside. We have nowhere else to put them. The bank is coming. I am recording every single second of this interaction, I said, my voice ice cold and perfectly steady. You are trespassing on private property. Preston walked right into a trap. I gave him a fake code because I knew you were using him as a rat to break into my home. If you are not off my property in exactly 60 seconds, I am sending this high-definition video directly to the police department and pressing criminal charges for attempted burglary. And Tristan, if you kick my door one more time, I will personally file a civil lawsuit against you for property damage. You wouldn't dare, Tristan screamed at the camera, his face turning an ugly shade of red, a vein bulging in his neck. You owe us this space. Dad is losing the house because of the economy. Try me, I said calmly. 59, 58, 57. Beatrice grabbed Tristan's arm. Genuine, paralyzing fear finally overriding her blinding entitlement. She realized I held all the cards. Come on, let's go. He's completely lost his mind. He's dangerous. He's a selfish psychopath, Tristan shrieked, flipping off the camera lens with both hands. They dragged the heavy box back to the SUV, threw it in the trunk with a loud crash, and peeled out of the driveway, burning rubber and leaving thick black marks on my concrete. I hit save on the app. I named the video file evidence_trespassing_attempted_break-in_1.mp4. I backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. I didn't stop there. I treated my personal life the exact same way I treat a multimillion-dollar commercial building project. I fortified the perimeter against all known threats. I called the 3 major credit bureaus and put a hard, impenetrable freeze on my social security number and my credit profile so they couldn't try to open accounts in my name. I went down to the county clerk's office in person, stood in line for 2 hours, and filed a formal fraud alert on my property title. This specific legal maneuver meant that if anyone, say, a desperate father armed with forged signatures and a fake notary, tried to file a quitclaim deed or take out a home equity loan against my house, the clerk was legally required to call me directly and verify the transaction with a photo ID in person. I built an absolute, impenetrable concrete wall around my life. But in my experience, a wall isn't always enough to stop a relentless parasite. Sometimes you need to bring in a legal wrecking ball. I knew exactly who to call to handle the wrecking ball. Silas was my college roommate, a brilliant, incredibly sharp guy who had gone on to become a ruthless corporate litigator for one of the most prestigious law firms downtown. Silas didn't normally deal in messy family law or petty disputes, but he dealt heavily in intimidation, contracts, and utterly destroying people who tried to commit fraud. I invited him over to the house, poured him a glass of expensive, aged scotch, and laid everything out on the table. I showed him the Ring camera footage. I printed out the nasty text messages from the extended family. I explained the attempted quitclaim deed fraud, and I told him about Harrison's desperate confession regarding their impending bankruptcy and the 3 mortgages. Silas sat in my living room, watching the high-definition video of Tristan kicking my door like a petulant toddler. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his scotch, the ice clinking against the glass, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a great white shark smelling blood in the water. "Oh, Julian, this is going to be incredibly fun," Silas said, opening his sleek silver laptop and cracking his knuckles. "Let's draft some nightmares for your lovely family." 2 days later, a specialized legal courier, not the regular mailman, but a man in a suit who requires a signature, delivered a thick, heavy envelope to my parents' house. It was a formal cease and desist letter, printed on thick, watermarked legal paper from Silas's highly respected, terrifyingly expensive firm. It was an absolute work of art. It outlined absolutely everything in excruciating, undeniable legal detail. The hostile trespassing on private property, the attempted real estate fraud with the quitclaim deed, the coordinated digital harassment and defamation campaign orchestrated by Tristan. It stated clearly, citing specific state laws, that any further attempts to contact me, approach my property, or mention my name, my likeness, or my profession on any social media platform would result in an immediate permanent restraining order and a massive civil lawsuit for emotional distress, harassment, and defamation of character. It also heavily implied that we had enough evidence to forward a fraud complaint to the district attorney regarding the forged lease documents. It was the absolute nuclear option. But with a load-bearing wall, if the foundation is rotting from years of toxic water damage, you don't try to patch it with cheap duct tape. You cut the rot out completely down to the bedrock and you pour new concrete. The effect of Silas's letter was instantaneous and deeply, profoundly satisfying. The flying monkeys immediately stopped calling. The threatening text messages from Aunt Sylvia dried up overnight. Tristan, terrified that Silas would actually subpoena his fake financial records and expose his entire life as a lie during a defamation suit, completely deleted his crying storytime video from all his platforms within an hour of signing for the envelope. He went entirely silent online. The silence that followed wasn't heavy or oppressive like the silence at the barbecue. It was incredibly clean. It was the absolute peaceful silence of a structural foundation that was finally stable, secure, and protected from the elements. 1 month passed. A month of absolute, uninterrupted peace. Without the constant, draining emotional vampire of my family sucking my energy and making me feel worthless, my professional life absolutely skyrocketed. I threw myself into my work with renewed focus. I was managing a massive, highly complex structural inspection for a new high-rise project downtown. The developer was a billionaire named Mr. Abernathy, a self-made man who absolutely hated corporate fluff, despised yes-men, and valued hard facts above all else. During a critical board meeting with investors, the lead architect tried to push through a design for a massive, floating glass atrium that looked beautiful on paper but was structurally compromised at the anchor points. Everyone in the room was too afraid to challenge the famous architect. But I stood up, walked to the front of the room, put my engineering calculations on the projector, and proved mathematically that a mild seismic event or even a severe windstorm would shatter the glass and collapse the support beams, potentially killing dozens of people. The boardroom went dead silent. The architect looked furious, his face red. But Mr. Abernathy leaned back in his expensive leather chair, looked at my numbers, looked at me, and smiled a genuine smile. "Finally," Abernathy said loudly, his voice booming in the quiet room. "Someone in this room with a spine who cares about the actual foundation instead of just making things look pretty for a magazine cover. You're Julian, right?" "Yes, sir," I said, standing tall. "You're leading the safety and structural oversight for the entire project from now on. I want you reporting directly to me. Whatever you need, you get it," he declared, dismissing the architect with a wave of his hand. That promotion came with a massive salary bump, a beautiful corner office overlooking the city, and a level of professional respect I had never experienced. I was finally being rewarded for exactly who I was. The guy who did the hard work, the guy who made sure the walls didn't fall down. While my life was rapidly ascending, my family's fragile, fake facade was violently crumbling to the ground. I didn't have to seek out the information. In a small town, catastrophic bad news travels faster than the speed of light. Silas called me one Tuesday afternoon, laughing so hard he could barely breathe into the phone. "Julian, you have to look at the local news blotter online right now," Silas choked out, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. I opened my browser and searched. The truth had finally violently caught up to Tristan. His brand was exposed as a complete, undeniable fraud. He had been running a fake luxury giveaway scam on his social media pages, collecting entry fees from naive teenagers for a chance to win designer bags and cash prizes he never actually owned. A group of victims had organized, and the Federal Trade Commission had officially opened an investigation into wire fraud. All of his social media accounts were permanently banned, and his bank accounts were frozen. Worse than that, the Ferrari was gone. Felix, the slick salesman from the dealership, had apparently run a deeper, secondary credit check on my mother after the initial lease signing and discovered the massive, impending foreclosure on their home that they had tried to hide. The financing company panicked, realizing they were never going to get a single monthly payment. They didn't even wait for a missed payment. They sent a repo man in the middle of the night. According to Aunt Sylvia, who was now complaining bitterly on Facebook to anyone who would listen because my parents had desperately tried to move into her basement and she refused them, the repo tow truck dragged the bright red Ferrari out of my parents' driveway at 3 a.m. Tristan apparently stood on the front lawn in his designer underwear, screaming and crying, begging the tow truck driver to stop because losing the car would ruin his aesthetic and destroy his brand deals. A week later, the bank finalized the paperwork. My parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house they had completely drained of every drop of equity to fund Tristan's endless fantasy, was officially foreclosed on. The sheriff arrived, changed the locks, and put a padlock on the door. They had lost absolutely everything. They had gambled their entire lives on the facade, and when the wind finally blew, the whole structure collapsed into dust, leaving them with nothing but the clothes on their backs. As autumn rolled in, my house was finally completely finished. The months of grueling renovations were fully complete. I had bought a beautiful, thick, hand-woven Persian rug for the living room. A brand new one that cost a small fortune, not a dusty hand-me-down from a relative. The famous guest room that Tristan had aggressively tried to claim as his own was no longer a guest room at all. I had completely transformed it into my personal engineering home office and a private gym. My complex blueprints were spread out proudly on a massive, custom-built, solid oak desk that I bought to celebrate my promotion. There was no cheap ring light in the corner. There was no pink, flashy decor. There were no cameras. It was entirely, unapologetically my space, built for focus and strength. I decided it was time to try again. I wanted to permanently overwrite the bad memory of the first disastrous barbecue. I wanted to christen the house properly. I sent out a new set of invitations. Much smaller this time, highly curated. No toxic family group chats. No forced obligations. Wood-fired pizza, good craft beer, and real people on the back porch. Saturday at 6 p.m. No dress code. I invited my Grandma Clara, who promised to bring an even bigger batch of potato salad. I invited Silas, my legal wrecking ball. I invited Mr. Henderson, my next-door neighbor who had encouraged me when I was covered in paint. I even took a risk and invited Mr. Abernathy, my new boss. Surprisingly, he RSVP'd yes within 10 minutes, saying he preferred a good backyard pizza and a cold beer over a stiff country club steak dinner any day of the week. At exactly 6 p.m. on Saturday, the backyard was full of vibrant life and genuine laughter. We didn't sit rigidly at the formal dining table. We sat comfortably on the wooden porch swing and the concrete steps, enjoying the cool evening air. Mr. Abernathy arrived wearing jeans, holding a premium six-pack of imported stout, telling incredible, gritty stories about his early days working on dangerous construction sites in the 1980s. Silas was making everyone laugh until their sides hurt with wildly inappropriate, hilarious stories about his terrible dating life and the crazy clients he dealt with downtown. Grandma Clara was holding court in the most comfortable armchair, sipping a glass of sweet iced tea and telling us scandalous stories about her wild youth in the 1960s that made Silas blush. Mr. Henderson walked over from the fence carrying a housewarming gift. It was a heavy, beautifully glazed ceramic pot, holding a vibrant, tall, green snake plant. "These things are virtually impossible to kill," Mr. Henderson grunted kindly, handing the heavy pot to me. "They don't need a lot of flashy sunlight or constant attention to survive. They just do the work. Roots take time, son. But once they hold deep. This house has good roots now. You did a hell of a job." "Thanks, Mr. Henderson," I said, feeling a genuine lump in my throat. I placed the plant carefully on the patio table, right where the empty plates had sat months ago. I looked around the yard at the faces illuminated by the warm string lights I had hung along the fence. Nobody was asking me for a cash loan. Nobody was aggressively demanding I sign a legal document to bail them out of their own terrible financial choices. Nobody was comparing me to my brother. Nobody made me feel like an appliance, a walking bank account, or a blunt tool to be used and discarded when I was no longer convenient. I sat back on the wooden porch swing, listening to the warm hum of genuine conversation and the clinking of beer bottles. I looked out at the small lemon tree I had planted in the front yard. It was small, it was just starting out, but it was growing. It was alive. It was thriving in the soil I provided. I pulled my phone out of my pocket one last time. I opened my settings and went to my blocked contacts list. I scrolled through the names. Harrison, Beatrice, Tristan, Sylvia, Preston. A long, depressing list of toxic waste that had anchored me down for over 3 decades, keeping me from reaching my full potential. I stared at their names, waiting for the familiar pang of guilt that usually accompanied thoughts of my family. But it never came. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel the need to seek their approval. I just felt an overwhelming, incredible sense of profound relief. I realized in that moment that setting a boundary isn't an act of cruelty, no matter what manipulators tell you. Setting a boundary is the ultimate necessary act of self-preservation. It is pouring the concrete foundation for the rest of your life so that you can actually build something beautiful on top of it. My parents made their choices. They chose the shiny, fake facade over the solid, boring structure. They chose the illusion of wealth over the reality of hard work. And when the inevitable storm came, their house fell down because there was nothing holding it up. Mine stood firm. My house isn't empty anymore. It is heavily fortified against the storm. It is warm. It is legally, physically, and emotionally mine. And for the very first time in 32 years, the foundation isn't cracking under the crushing weight of someone else's insane expectations. The load-bearing wall is finally supporting a roof I actually want to live under, protecting the people who actually deserve to be inside. It took losing my entire biological family to realize that true family isn't about blood. Blood just means you share genetics. True family is about the people who respect your boundaries, celebrate your actual hard work, and show up when you invite them over to share a meal. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard, uncompromising line in the sand and walk away from the people who were supposed to love you the most just to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of people who survived the collapse and built something stronger. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.